Hello and welcome to Beyond Top 10 Tennis. My name is Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge and I'm your host. I am the author of 11 books, a CEO of 12 years, the founder of a startup set on data privacy, but most importantly, an elite performance coach of over 18 years, having worked with athletes throughout Europe, the United States to Australia. And of course, most excitingly, I am the world's leading scientist on coach and athlete performance, specifically behind how to develop a top 10 tennis ranking. My work includes everything from mitigating injuries to conditioning behaviors that set a player up long term for the long game towards a top 10 tennis ranking. I am behind theories from the optimal performance theory, optimal behavior for optimal performance, the barrier breaker, the rule of transference to the golden rule. As has become custom, each episode we dive into one of my books to share additional insights and dig a little bit deeper. Today's episode is a new point of focus. We've previously been focusing on the secrets to optimal performance success, but today's episode marks the start of the secrets to optimal coaching success, the role of experience, optimal performance practices, and outcomes in the real world. And I absolutely cannot wait because we've had that whole other book behind us now with that incredible foundation. So look, today's episode, it's new and I'm really looking forward to it because as always, we're looking at how we're developing the player to that parent to coach for that road ahead towards a top 10 tennis ranking. So as always, buckle in and enjoy the ride. Thank you so much for listening today. Whether you are new or you've been with us from the very beginning, thank you so much because today's episode is number 51 and it marks the beginning of the secrets to optimal coaching success. And you would have heard, I'm sure, my excitement in that introduction there because we now have such an extensive body of work that is 50 episodes behind us that really unraveled the secrets to optimal performance success and forms a really healthy baseline or benchmark for us to grow from. And that's what this is all about, to hand you the progressions needed irrespective of where your ranking is. If you are top 30 in the world on the WTA and or ATP tour, or you are still at that club or academy level, it's all about the steps in place. And I do term that as a progression. So it's a step-by-step approach on improving your performance and those underlying markers responsible for those performance gains, and that also correlate with your ranking moving closer, so the ascension in that respect. And look, the secrets to optimal coaching success, the role of experience, optimal performance practices and outcomes in the real world, the title really sums that up. And I think we're going to go back to the original format where I've been pulling out those additional insights because recall, if you have listened to our previous episodes, the last 5 episodes, primarily 5 to 6 episodes, recapped, really dived into the secrets to optimal performance success and summarized it and just drew out those additional insights. But prior to that, there was roughly, let's say, 44-ish episodes that really more explicitly shared what each individual, not chapter, but all those sections were all about. So going off those episode numbers alone, that is roughly the 44 different sections. So you can refer back to the episodes, but also each of our episodes have the corresponding blogs there. So that's over 50 blog posts that essentially piggyback off the episode, and or the episode piggybacks off the blog, just to share, I think, additional insights that maybe the room and or space was not there to share directly, and or it's just a little bit of a sprinkle on top to just answer potentially those missing pieces to compound that influence even more. So when we're looking at the secrets to optimal coaching success, today's episode, we're focusing on obviously the first chapter. Now the first chapter is on page 27 if you're following along, and it's all about non-typical building blocks. Now, the first part of this chapter is 1.0, so that's on page 30, again, if you want to follow along, and it's on fundamental skills. So fundamental skills is the premise for today's episode, with that work behind us. But it's so important for this topic to recap some really important, I think, discussions that we previously had and or insinuated. Now, when we're looking at fundamental skills, one of the biggest is about skill development. So we do have episodes on skill development, the discrete skills, serial skills, the processes involved and the progressions, etc. But let's focus on fundamental skills and why. So why this is a topic of interest. And it goes that obviously this is dependent on what level of play you're at, but we're going to rewind whether you are 10 years old, we'll just rewind maybe a few years. But if you are that 21, 22-year-old that's fresh on tour, whether you are, top 30, top 15, top 80, irrespective, let's rewind back to maybe 10, 15 years ago, maybe even a little bit more. And if you are the coaches out there and or parents, rewind even from when you were learning, and that's really the primary focus, because back then it pushed back over 2 decades ago, which does date a lot of us out there. But where this is going is that back then, and I am or have touched on this in the accompanying blog post, is that we were encouraged to play outside. Really simple, but through these actions where we almost, that was our choice, we did not have mobile phones to play with or the internet. And this is really ironic / hilarious, because I can't believe I'm also having this conversation, because I remember once upon a time how I viewed my parents to grandparents and the generation gap. But okay, back to the core topic. Here, when we rewind and you were encouraged to play outside, and you were forced essentially to learn skills inadvertently for your own good. But these skills formed your baseline. So the fundamental skills you had, you learned. So whether it was outside, walking across some type of plank that could have been raised off the ground, whether it was a stick or a driveway, it does not matter. These are very random examples, but through them you are developing a form of balance, trying not to fall over, one foot in front of the other on a piece of rope. Just really simple activities, and you got better and better at acquiring balance and or then dynamic balance. So dynamic balance is essentially when you're in motion. So when we're looking at tennis, the tennis players, when they're going to contact their forehand ground stroke, they require a level of dynamic balance. And so one of the technical parameters I am behind is the V by Dr. B. And that's going to be unveiled. Well, it is in all of my texts, but specifically the latest book. So again, if you've been following along the last couple of episodes, you are aware that I have been writing this year. And this is the first year I've been balancing in a different way the podcast, but also the book, which means you get additional insights, which is never before has been done, about different topics that are included within this book, because it's very hard to write at the same time and hold that back. So it has inadvertently been shared, or little snippets, in the best possible way, which this is this book that's going to be released, that I wasn't sure if we would release it this year. It's getting there, which means it looks like it's going to be released in probably towards the very end of the year. So we still have plenty of time, or that's what I keep telling myself anyway. But what I'm sharing here is that it's an incredible landmark finding and discovery there. So it's behind how specifically to develop a top 10 tennis ranking. And that's what all the books are about. And this will be number 12. And it's essentially a collection, but going back to what I touched on at the very beginning of today's episode, is about the progressions, how to get there, which means we've developed the toolkit, specifically how, and I am so proud of myself to get there. But for you, irrespective if you're that player, the parent, or the coach, you now actually will have a complete toolkit. I'm going to leave that conversation for later because it's huge and I'm very excited by it. So I had to let you in on that. But where this is going is that it's the fundamental skills. So it's forming that baseline, and the secrets to optimal coaching success is that next level up from the secrets to optimal performance success. So they're used in tandem. But we need to learn these skills inadvertently in some way, shape, or form. Now, what has happened from whether that was 10, 20 years ago is the way in which a child develops and or acquires these skills it's changed. It is not as easy now to ascertain and or gauge the level of these skills because of the levels of inactivity. But there are various reasons behind this. Obviously, we've got socioeconomic. We can be very mindful of that, and safety can also be one of them, though we have competing priorities and challenges, because back then access to technology was quite limited. So not every household had the internet. Can you believe that? Because, oh my goodness, which means if you did not have access to the internet, you did not have access to many, many things. To load a video game to play, it was very painful. You could do it, but it took a while. And you were limited in your choices of those games and or access to purchase them. And there are so many, I think, moving parts here where you were limited. You couldn't just, if you wanted to listen to music, remember a Walkman? And so it was not as easy to carry around. I mean, it was, but let's say as then an iPod to an iPhone, etc. And I'm trying not to get off topic here, but that's a whole other discussion, and you can really think about. So obviously, if you are that younger player athlete, please do have that discussion with your coach and or parent and or guardian to gain those additional insights. So where I'm going here is that we did not have the distractions that very apparent now and or over the last, probably the last 10 years roughly. A lot of things have changed in that respect. But it's not only the distractions per se, it's the ability to be encouraged to partake in activities. But also, when we're looking at fundamental skills, one of the biggest barriers is if you have not developed a core fundamental skill, so a baseline skill, that hinders your ability to participate and enjoy yourself in another sport and or a sport of choice or a type of activity. An example of this could be catching a ball, any type of ball, but having the confidence and the skill of simply catching. Now, some of you will go, well, that's very easy. I can do that, no problem. But no, that is not the case for everyone. And I'm speaking to you now as that coach, whether I've been based in Australia, Europe, the United States, it doesn't matter. It happens across the board. In some places, it is more prominent than others. Now, this is not new. It has actually progressed, so worsened over the years. But there are signs of this at least 15, 20 years ago, which definitely should not have been the case, but that is when it started, which means, and it has shown that over the last 10 years, it's gotten worse because of activities that you or the current crop of players, athletes participate in more naturally now than previously. So as the coaches to parents, guardians out there, the activities you participated in 20, 30 years ago, they are obviously not the same activities that player, that athlete, and or your child is participating in now. Now, there is nothing wrong with this. It is more so being mindful of the adaptations that need to take place. So we do have episodes in the past on modifications, on how you need to modify your lessons and or tools, so even your racket that player child uses to progress. One of my favorites is if that hand-eye coordination is not as apparent. Maybe it is someone, a child, that player, the athlete that really enjoys gaming, so they have a really good level of hand-eye coordination when it comes to that type of application. But let's take that child, that athlete, that player away from the screen then and or that device, and you put them on a tennis court. Now, putting a tennis racket in their hand is not going to be as transferable. So we need to take a step back. Once upon a time, maybe you could do that. There's a very big maybe, because that obviously depends on your approach. Now, what a simple tool is, you remove the racket. We want to focus on that hand-eye coordination. So you have a hand and you have a ball, which means we want to practice hitting that ball with our hand to begin with. And it's very simple. It can be a lot of fun though. So irrespective of how old you are, I would encourage you to go ahead and do that. But it's an example of a stepping stone to begin developing that level of hand-eye coordination. And instead of hitting that ball, then you're going to start catching it. And then you can progress off the top of my head here to let's close one eye. Okay, then let's close the opposite eye with just one eye open, interchange. And then let's see what it feels like with both eyes closed. It's going to be a little bit complicated, obviously, if you cannot see, but it's really just trying to get the movement there. And it's a very simple activity that almost everyone can participate in. And then let's pick up that tennis racket, but maybe not the actual tennis racket. We could progress to a bat. We could progress to a stick. Something very simple, so a different object, because we are conditioning our hands and our eyes to develop a level of coordination that we are comfortable with. We are building a level of confidence in that ability to acquire that fundamental skill. So that is just a bit of fun and an example of how you can develop a fundamental skill and apply that to your teaching practices. So in this case, we're looking at tennis, and that's just an example of a forehand ground stroke and or a backhand ground stroke, but it also transfers then into a forehand volley and or backhand volley, and there obviously are progressions there for the serve and obviously other aspects of the game. But to even get to any of those other aspects, or to a full shot, a full and complete ground stroke, and acquiring that type of skill, you are pulling on these fundamental skills, because we haven't even touched on balance. So, and then the level of dynamic balance as a fundamental skill, which means you really need to take a step back and maybe 2 or 3 more to think of, how can I develop this type of skill? And it's not always on the tennis court. There are activities off court. Now, again, 2-3 decades ago, these were inadvertently learned through almost being forced to play. Now, I say forced to play in a nice way, because there was no other choice, so you just did. You did not have the luxury of sitting at home and binging on Netflix or whatever your platform choice is. So with that aside, it's really being mindful of the level of fundamental skills, and the acquirement of them is potentially, once upon a time, was taken for granted. And now with this generation, it's something not to be taken for granted for. I cannot tell you how many athletes over the years that I've worked with to overseen that have the most, let's say, interesting techniques. And these type of techniques that cause injuries because of their they're twisting their bodies in an unnatural way, but they've been taught to hit a ball a certain way, so it feels normal to them. But what they don't know, these players, that if they had the capacity to develop these fundamental skills, they're allowed to, or they have the ability to move more freely through their body, to use their full capacity. When you begin to twist and torque your body in unnatural ways that compromise what that shot is all about, so that the performance you're looking for, you can get some really interesting examples. And I've seen them irrespective of what the shot is. The twists and the torques, they're all there. Also irrespective of that age. Typically, I will see more rigid adults playing. Whether or not they obviously have that ability, it's a question, because there could have been some ailments that have happened over the years that have prevented them from that. So that's a very different discussion. But when you have a young up-and-coming player not exhibiting just fundamental skills, it's a cause for concern, because if you have the capacity to prevent that twist, those torques in unnatural ways that could potentially lead to an injury later on, that's something that's almost a duty of care in my eyes, to be able to put your hand up and say, hey, maybe we can try this, because this could make you susceptible to developing this later on. Now, if that player athlete continues to perform, for argument's sake, their backhand in a certain way that really is compromising certain joints, for example, and if they keep doing that into their early 20s, 30s, and for each and every time they participate in play, is an incredibly high likelihood that they're developing almost a lifelong injury if they continue to perform that way. And there are a lot of, I think, adults out there that carry an injury. A tennis elbow has to be one of the best, and I say best for the sake of popularity, because it's everywhere. Now, you can obviously modify your game to prevent this from happening, and obviously put the work in to make sure you are safeguarding yourselves in that respect as well. But more often than not, the education is not there, and it's not so much the education of the player athlete, it's talking directly to the coaches and the accessibility to that type of education. So there's a very big void there, and that's where I get excited about all of my books to date, because this one that's coming out really pieces them together to show that here is actually your complete toolkit now. That it is actually from 1 through to 11, and is ironically over 11 years of data, of research, of rigorous scientific investigation that underpins this. So it's not just, let's say, a subjective opinion. And this is really important, again, when we come full circle in regards to developing skills, but most importantly, the baseline skills. So these fundamental skills that set the precedent for future performance developments. Okay, so that's a pretty, I think, healthy introduction to just share where we've come from, where we're going in respect to a fundamental skill. So let's pull out a few parts of this chapter just so we can dive into just a little bit deeper and have a bit of a discussion around that. So again, if you want to follow along, we're on page 30. When beginning to crawl, to walk, then to run, there are skills coupled in between that allow the developmental process to take a streamlined pathway. That is akin to, yes, those progressions touched on earlier, from a tennis ball to simply hitting the ball with your hand and or catching it. This pathway encompasses a variety of fundamental skills that in turn are utilized in everyday life without consciously applying. An example there would be catching that tennis ball with our original example and not even thinking about it. It's on cycle. So it's a repetitive motion, you over and over and over again until it gets to a state of autonomy is what we're after. As a child develops and enters into their adolescent years, it becomes apparent when children have not quite grasped these fundamental skills. They fall behind. And I think that is the biggest basis of today's episode. It is preventing the fall behind. So it's preventing the lag. So where I was going earlier on is, despite the generational gap from, the coaches to the parents, even myself out there, to, the athletes, the players I've worked with over the last almost 20 years now. And there are varying gaps there, and they start at right here. They start at not having acquired these fundamental skills, but because it has not been picked up on, they have continued to develop, but they're at a disadvantage. So if you ever have looked at a player, so this is specifically for the more senior high-performing players now, to the ones potentially on tour or those on the cusp of breaking onto the tours, the respective tours. You have those that you may play against, or those at a lower level that are yet to get on tour, and they have very interesting styles of play, and you can see the lag there. You can see why they cannot hit and or perform a shot in a certain way, and more often than not it's because these fundamental skills have not been developed as readily as they're available. So by that I mean is that they're so simple in a way, or I say they're simple because because they form the very beginning of learning, and where a child learns these very simple skills. Now, if they are not afforded the opportunity to learn these skills simply through inadvertent interactions, playing outdoors, indoors, irrespective, but it's at that level of physical activity. Now, if they are not exposed to this in their formative years, and when they are developing that level of hand-eye coordination, for example, if they're held back, this will show later on, especially if the work is not done to acquire these skills. Obviously, if you're playing at a relatively high level, you have these skills, but is your level of autonomy the same as the person you're competing against? Now, what I mean there is that you may have relative confidence in this area, but when you're performing your stroke, is it as open and streamlined as you'd like and fluid as those who are currently and or have previously resided inside the top 10? Because I'll tell you this, to progress all the way towards the top 10 tennis ranking, we know the fundamental skills that are required to get there, which means you need to acquire them and you need to fine-tune them and you need to build on them and build on them. And we've touched on the peak performance cycles in the past, and that's what it's all about. But if you do not have these skills, we know with the data, we know that the likelihood of you getting closer and closer and closer towards the top 10 is incredibly small, because you do not have and or you are not actively acquiring these skills. And that is where I think fundamental skills take on such a huge light, because they are developed so early on, but they actually have a pivotal role to play throughout that performance pathway. I'm a little bit passionate, I'm sure you can tell, about this, because I know how important they are. And if you're out there and you're really looking to ascend towards that top 10 tennis ranking, that's what it's all about. And it's probably the perfect time now to share that we like ensuring we take that humanized approach. Now, it's just as applicable developing these skills, whether it's in tennis and or in life, because at the end of the day, we are all human, irrespective of what age you are, human. But the ability to acquire a skill is not just in tennis. It's obviously in sport, but it's obviously in any task you take on. You potentially need to learn something new, especially if it's something completely new to you, the task. You may be required to learn new skills. And for all those, whether you are the coach out there and or parent or guardian, when you pull on your profession specifically, you are going to be asked and or need to acquire new skills on a rolling basis. Maybe not every day, maybe not every week, but those challenges will eventually arise, and how you handle that in acquiring these skills talks back to your capacity, whether you are readily able to upskill because you already have that foundation area learning in place to acquire new skills, or if that has been hindered and you have difficulty acquiring new skills, it's about filling in those gaps. Where does the difficulty come from? How can we make it more streamlined for you to ensure you have those fundamental skills to acquire a new skill? Now, I know it sounds a little bit complex there, but I hope you're following along, because we're really just taking the performance side from tennis into the performance side, let's say, in the real world, but the real professional world in that sense, working non-tennis. And I really like I just touching on that humanized approach, because oftentimes it can be forgotten that tennis players, we're all individuals and we're all humans, same with the coaches, the parents, the guardians, and we can all help one another in the best possible way. And we've touched on a number of times that triangular relationship, so specifically for the parents and guardians out there, and in this area, how you can help your child, that player, that athlete, in this respect. And is that how you learn a skill, how are they learning a skill? They're learning a physical, so a performance-based fundamental skill. Now, what type of fundamental skills are important to you and your career and your profession, and the discussions that you can have? So the exchange there, I think, is a really interesting discussion and a really good talking point, just to get not just your head around, but your child's head around in this respect, the importance of these skills, to encourage them to learn these skills, and then also to make sure the coach, so for the coaches out there, that you're all on the same page in this respect. And it's an incredibly valuable aspect of that triangular relationship. All right. The good news is no child has to be left behind. The even better news is that although fundamental skills are more readily acquired at the toddler to early childhood age range, these skills can still be learned later on. And that's what's really important, is that you see the skills gap in potentially the younger teenagers. But it's okay, it's not too late. You can still acquire and develop these skills. It's just about noticing, it's being mindful, and for the coaches especially out there, to picking up on these gaps and to get to work to fill them. In today's world, it is commonplace more than ever for children to in fact not have fundamental skills as earlier as once before. And the reason why children and adolescents of today do not necessarily have these fundamental skills, the why behind this is embedded in the developmental process between inside and outside, being active and sedentary interaction, and inside the levels of exposure to the outside world. So in a roundabout way, that's really talking back to what was shared earlier on, is that, you know, that 2-3 decades ago, you didn't have a choice. It was outside. There was literally no point in staying inside unless you just want to stare at a wall. And most of us, that was not our way of having fun. For some, maybe, but that wasn't, especially if you're a child or developing child out there. And these days, there are the screen is a very big distraction. And back then, we had limited access to the screen. What was on the TV back then, it was not something you want to sit in front of all day. Those behaviors were not ingrained in us. It was very limited and limiting amounts of time in this respect, and it's changed. So society has changed in this respect. So it talks towards all of those competing priorities, and one such is almost that continuous or continued distraction of the screen in whatever way you use it, whether it is your phone, it is your tablet, or it is a TV, or it is the applications on any of them or all of them. It's not just one, it's not just a TV, it can be a laptop, a desktop, a tablet, to a phone. There are so many, and most, whether child, adult, you have access to more than one of them. And so you really are competing in this respect to not distract yourself in this respect. It is to put them aside and enjoy yourself outdoors. And I know this could be, no, that's just, but let's bring it back to fundamental skills. And if you're listening, there's a very good chance you are a tennis player and or a player athlete, or that coach, the parent guardian with an interest in tennis in this respect. So we're really leaning towards them, the performance spectrum, how we are progressing towards that top 10 tennis ranking. These skills, these fundamental skills, how they are acquired, that humanized approach, and that every single child, player, athlete, even coach, parent, guardian has these distractions now, has these competing priorities that were not necessarily the case, that 2-3 decades plus ago. So for those who could be a bit too hard on themselves in this respect, give yourself a break. Cut yourself some slack, because they really are competing aspects for your attention. And that's another topic, but we want to center your attention on developing to acquiring these fundamental skills. We're trying to mitigate the distractions, but we're also acknowledging that distractions happen, that distractions are there, in particular quite significantly in respect to those screen and or devices, and the steps we can put in place. Now, the steps are going to vary for everyone, irrespective of your ranking and or state of performance and or play. What we're really talking about is those performance progressions and how we are going to progress, being mindful of developing these skills. So if you put a device before a skill, that is probably an indicator that your heart's maybe not in the right place for this pathway. And when we're saying pathway, towards that top 10 tennis ranking. If you really do want to acquire the right skills to get there, then I think it's a no-brainer. Sport is a common ground for children to utilize these skills, but more so learn these fundamental skills that in turn are everlasting. Any excuse to play will witness a child, regardless of their age or stage of development, apply these fundamental skills or attempt to, simply by their want for and to experience play. And I think that's such an important aspect here, and it's just been embedded in today's episode, is about learning but play. Outdoor, it's that physical activity, but it's play. You are playing. Tennis is a game that you play, and I think in today's world we often forget that we are playing. We are not forced to, and a lot of players on the WTA ATP tour really need to be mindful that you are playing. I know that there is that serious component there, but I can guarantee you that playful aspect, and if that is held with you throughout, the likelihood of you progressing towards that top 10 tennis ranking is exponentially higher. And you go, why? Is because you're playing, and we know that if you are enjoying, you are thriving, and you have then that capacity to want to learn, to even increase your performance even more, because you just enjoy it. And that's when when you feel like that, you're in the right place. You know that you're having so much fun. This is where you want to be. So specifically, obviously, for the players, the athletes, that child out there. But the same applies for the coaches out there as well, because it is, I think, a form of play in varying respects. And that's really what we want to underscore here. So if you are serious then on developing and or heading towards that top 10 tennis ranking, one of those fundamental components to keep with you is play. And it's to be mindful of the capacity to play, to keep that front and center. But I think more than anything that we've touched on today is learning those fundamental skills and progressing. It's modifications, ensuring they are there, and that if there is a void present, it's not too late, irrespective if you are, 8-10 years of old. Well, that's very early on. You are learning them now. So for the coaches, parents, guardians out there, they're learning them. Then they definitely should be. All right, so you are absolutely primed to begin on that pathway when we've touched on previously, for example, the 10 years of play. But more specifically then, for the players who are 16, 17 years of age, who have noticed a bit of a skills gap there. So you've noticed that one of those fundamental skills is not as fine-tuned. There is nothing wrong with taking a few steps back to integrate into your training additional hand-eye coordinations, taking on different sports to learn new skills and or to fine-tune your current skills. And we've got episodes on sister sport interactions, for example, and especially when you are at the young adult stage, so you're 17, 18, 19 years of age, and if there's a gap there, it's important more than ever then to participate in them, because it really fine-tunes and strengthens then those fundamental skills inadvertently, and that is incredibly powerful. For the players, the athletes who are on tour, whether you're early to late 20s or even in your 30s, it's never too late to even fine-tune those skills. So whether it's your anticipation, for example, there are a myriad of problem-solving tools to solutions that are available to have fun with. So it's an inadvertent ability to play, and how you can integrate them into your training, whether it's on court and or off court, and to have fun with that, because problem solving in any way, shape or form will help you directly on court, and that is an incredibly interesting discussion to be had that we'll leave for another time. But look, if you are set on progressing towards that top 10 tennis ranking, let's remember play being front and center, but those fundamental skills really form that baseline, the foundation there to heading towards that top 10 tennis ranking. Thank you so much for listening. To grab a copy of The Secrets to Optimal Coaching Success, head on over to AM8 International. That is am8international.com. For any comments or questions, head to AM8 or Topic Thread. That's the social platform set on data privacy. To interact with Beyond Top 10 Tennis, head on over to Twitter, Threads, LinkedIn or Instagram, and to catch up on our weekly coaching tips, head on over to TikTok. And of course, to catch up on our blogs, head on over to AMA International and look for our blogs tab there, or directly on Medium. They are all available. So look, as always, I will leave all the links in the episode notes. For something different, head on over to Pink Octopus Books. That is where my fictional release is. To view this week's question and poll, be sure to visit Spotify if you're listening on another platform. Or for something left of field, visit Spruik for some random polls. And of course, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, like, share, and all of the above would be absolutely phenomenal. And for those of you who are interested, we do have scholarships available on AMA International, as well as options to work with me exclusively to nudge you closer towards that top 10 tennis ranking. However, places are limited, so don't be shy and come and say hi. On that note, I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. They're just the beginning of such a wonderful book. The Secrets to Optimal Coaching Success is actually my third release, so we have jumped there, but we'll get into that in future episodes and the why there. But it's such a big stepping stone in the best possible way, and I'd really love to hear your feedback, how things are going, as well as your performance progressions. the more the merrier in that respect. But look, at the end of the day, I just really hope you just filled that void, those gaps in your current practices, whether performance-wise for that player or from a practical capacity for the coaches, parents, to guardians out there. So look, on that note, thank you so much for listening. I am so incredibly grateful. I am your host, Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge, and this is Beyond Top 10 Tennis, and I'll see you next time.